John McMullen, of course, from 97.3 ESPN.com, jumping on board, taking a look at, wrapping up the Eagles OTAs, John. And, one of the things I talked to with Mike about his column, which he asked a couple questions about this team. It's 7-9, the last year, and didn't make the playoff the year before. His line of questioning yesterday was really centered in on the fact that they kept this core. Do they have the talent with this 7-9 team? Was this the right move? Is this the right play for Howie Roseman? He's really gambling that this is the right core for them. And, how do you look at the way that they played it by deciding to keep this group of guys together? And I guess he's really betting on that different coaching. I don't want to say better coaching. Different coaching could get more out of this group. They're really betting on this core. And this is really Howie Roseman betting on himself, because a lot of these guys are guys that he picked.
Yeah, and I think it was the proper way to go. I think if you look at this team, specifically the three major players that Howie gave a lot of money to, it's Fletcher Cox, Lane Johnson, Zach Ertz. And those are three of the best players on the Philadelphia Eagles. So I don't think the proper spin on it is these guys were 7-9. I think the proper spin is you build on your good players, and that is something that every team in the NFL tries to do, or at least should try to do. So I think the point is you don't take two steps back and say, okay, we weren't very good, and Fletcher Cox, for instance, was on this team that was below 500, and say, we got to blow it up and go in a completely different direction.
Yeah.
I think you look at it as this is one of our core pieces, and we got to get better around them. And I think that's what the Eagles are attempting to do.
Yeah, John, you asked, is this the guy? I mean, you spend $103 million, $63 guaranteed. You sign him to one of the richest deals in NFL history. Howie Roseman looking at it like we had to differentiate ourselves from what we've been doing the last couple of years. It sounded like his message was there was too much turnover. So whether these are the right, most talented guys, they believe continuity almost trumps talent.
Well, I think continuity is important in the NFL, but as I said when I wrote about it, it's not only continuity on the field, it's continuity in the front office. So, and I think if you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is the team that is most thought of when people use that word, and basically they've had three coaches since 1969, and all three of them have won Super Bowls. So I think if you look at that organization and how they do things, that is what everyone should be trying to copy. And obviously the Eagles have not done that. They had a very good run under Andy Reid and Joe Banner, and decided to shift gears and take a chance on Chip Kelly. That didn't work. But as I said, when you change so drastically in the front office 2 times in one calendar year, that's not the way to be a successful NFL team. Now, this is the point. You can't do it again. This group has to work. And not only the group on the field, the group off the field. And that means Howie Roseman's got to start getting along with people, whether it's Doug Peterson, whether it's Joe Douglas, the new player personnel guy. He's got to start having some continuity in this front office. And basically, the only way you want people leaving this organization from this point forward, at least for the next 10, 15 years, if they're getting promotion, not getting shown the door, not getting fired, that's not the way to run an NFL franchise. So I think that part of it is even more important than the continuity on the field, which I agree with. You need, as best you can in a free agency era. This is not the 1970s when you had all those great teams that had Hall of Famers together because there wasn't anywhere else to go. It's more difficult in today's environment, but you have to do the best you can to keep your core pieces. And that part of Howie's plan, I agree with, and I think he's done a good job in identifying those pieces and extending them.
Well, and he started with Fletcher Cox, which it looks like both Fletcher Cox and the Eagles are hoping that he can expand his role to not only a great player on the field, but a leadership role in the locker room and off the field. I mean, that is another key factor that they are really tapping into Fletcher Cox with. And we discussed this earlier today, was if you were going to tap a guy on the shoulder and say, hey, you're going to be the guy, $63 million man, Fletcher Cox is probably the guy on this roster anyway that deserves it. And maybe on any roster, he's a good person, a good man.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think people look at it, and as Howie said yesterday, look, if this guy was on any team, under any coach, in any organization, he was going to get paid this kind of money because that's what kind of player he is. And as we talk about NFL contracts, we often mention timing is more important than anything else. So while he stands atop the mountain today with Ndamukong Suh, that might change tomorrow if Von Miller signs or Mo Wilkerson signs or K'Wan Short. You never know who's going to be the next guy. Somebody's going to surpass it. And at that point, it'll start looking a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. And that's just the nature of it. But when you have your best player and he's that good, you understand you're going to take a hit. You have to do it. And it's just part of doing business in the NFL.
John, give me your take on Von Miller. What happens there?
Well, it's interesting because Von is very public with his negotiating.
He will not play. No chance he plays on the tag, he said.
Yeah, and, on the Chelsea Handler show, if anybody watches that, now that it's moved to Netflix, earlier in the week he said the opposite. He's kind of going back and forth. What we know is he doesn't want to play. Nobody wants to play under the franchise tag.
I'll do it.
Well, yeah. But if you're in that situation, you want Fletcher Cox's contract. And certainly everybody's looking at. Mo Wilkerson spoke yesterday to the New York Post. He mentioned Fletcher Cox. And he said he wants that kind of contract or better. And that's what other teams are looking at. Other great players are looking at and setting as the standard. Von Miller's going to be in that same category. So, yeah, it's great to make $15, $16 million, and certainly we would all love it. But if you can get $55, $60 million guaranteed, it's your time to strike. That's what you try to do, and I certainly understand that. I find it very hard to believe. The problem with the Denver Broncos and the New York Jets, for that matter, with Mo Wilkerson, is they're up against it as far as the salary cap goes. And part of that is because they won the Super Bowl, and they have so many high-priced players to begin with. And that's why Malik Jackson's in Jacksonville and Danny Trevathan is in Chicago now, because they couldn't afford those type of players. And Brock Osweiler, obviously, in Houston. But this is their best player. This is their Fletcher Cox. And he's better than Fletcher, to be perfectly honest. He's he arguably, along with J.J. Watt, the most dominant defensive player in this game. I find it very hard to believe John Elway's going to screw this up, and they have to July 15th to get something long-term done. I believe they will still get something done. But if worse comes to worse, I find it very hard to believe that Von's going to sit out 10 games, which is what you really can do leverage-wise, and then sign the tender, and you still get that year under the free agency rules, so you have that accrued service time. But that, you're losing a heck of a lot of money that you're never going to get back, and I find it very hard to believe that Von's going to do that.
Yeah, and it's crazy that as you mentioned, they lost a couple of guys defensively because they couldn't afford them, and now they seem unwilling to pay another one. So they already let two walk and are still unwilling to pay Von Miller, who, this should be an interesting...
Well, they're willing to pay. They offered him a significant amount. I think the total value of the deal, it was over 103. I think it was 110 or 113 is what they offered him. But the guaranteed money is less than what Fletcher got, what Ndamukong Suh. So that's what they're fighting over, is that fully guaranteed money, and that's what players look to. But either way, the Broncos have certainly been willing to pay him a very, very substantial amount of money. It's just a matter of hammering out how much is going to be fully guaranteed.
Are the Jets comfortable with Geno Smith enough to just say, you know what, Ryan, until you're ready, we're going to go with Geno Smith?
Well, if they were comfortable enough with it, A, I would think they were insane, but B, if they were, then they would simply announce, look, thanks for the season, Ryan, and we're going to move on, and Geno's going to be our quarterback. They're not doing that because they don't have any belief in Geno Smith, nor should they, by the way. So it's been a very strange offseason for the Jets, and part of it is that they were in salary cap hell from the previous regime, and they have a lot of issues as far as that goes. And even if they sign Ryan Fitzpatrick at some point, which I still expect them to do, and they sign Mo Wilkerson, whether it's the franchise tag or something more extensive, they're going to have to juggle some pieces. That's how up against it they are as far as the salary cap goes. So that's been one of the issues. But when you're 60 minutes away from the playoffs, in theory, your mentality is you want to get there the next year. And I just think it's been a very strange way of doing business for the New York Jets to be so cavalier with the quarterback position. We understand what Ryan Fitzpatrick is. He's not the long-term answer. He's not a superstar by any stretch of the imagination. But as far as the so-called bridge quarterbacks, he's among the better of those types, and he's sure a heck of a lot better than Geno Smith. And obviously Christian Hackenberg and Bryce Petty, they're not ready to play. So I just think it's a very strange way of doing business, the way the Jets have handled these negotiations with Ryan Fitzpatrick.
All right, I'm keeping my eye on that Fitzpatrick thing. I think it's crazy what's going on with the Jets. It's also crazy to me what's happening in Denver. You know, I think both of those situations are a little bit wild. And not only Denver on the defensive side of the ball, at quarterback too, where they just said, you know what, we're going to go with either a rookie or Mark Sanchez. It just, to me,
or Trevor Siemian. I mean, he's got a chance.
And this is the defending Super Bowl champion we're talking about here.
Yeah, it's amazing. And of all the rookies, obviously Jared Goff, even though Jeff Fisher came out yesterday and said Case Keenum is going to be number one entering training camp, that's not going to last very long. But I think Paxton Lynch is much more likely than Carson Wentz to get on the field very, very quickly because seen enough of Mark Sanchez here the past couple of seasons to realize he's not the answer, and Paxton Lynch is the future, and if there's anyone who can succeed as a rookie, it's also Lynch. Mainly, not necessarily saying he's got better skill set than Goff or Wentz or even some of the lesser quarterbacks, but he's going to have the best supporting cast. So it's going to be interesting. I think he's going to get on the field a lot sooner than people expect.
We are 6 weeks away from Eagles training camp, and we will, of course, have full coverage from John over at 97.3 ESPN.com at JF McMullen. And you can keep tabs on John's national coverage at todayspigskin.com, where he serves over there as their national NFL columnist. John, thank you so much, man. Enjoy the weekend.
Hey, you too. Thanks, Mike.